Imagine being 15 years old. You're caught in that fragile space between childhood and adulthood, still learning who you are, still searching for love, still believing that tomorrow might be brighter than today. Now imagine your life being cut short. Your story ending not with dreams fulfilled, but with your name becoming a headline, your face appearing on missing posters, and your family left asking why. This is the story of Annie Kasperzak, a teenager whose life was filled with struggles and second chances, with laughter and pain, and finally, with a tragedy so shocking that it shook an entire community in Utah. Her story is not just about her death. It's about the fragile nature of young love, the dangers of secrecy, and the way a single lie spiraled into violence. It's about mistakes that could never be undone. This is not an easy story to hear, but it's one that deserves to be told. Chapter 1: The Early Life of Annie. Annie was born in 1996. Her early years were not easy. She spent much of her young childhood moving between foster homes, caught in the instability of a system that often fails to provide real security for children. But everything changed in 2005 when she was adopted by Vern and Diane Kasperzak. To Annie, this was a new beginning. She was finally part of a real family, one that loved her, one that promised to protect her. By the time she was in high school, Annie was known as a bright, expressive, and outgoing girl. She loved journaling, writing about her emotions and the things she hoped for in life. She was talkative, friendly, and had a wide smile that her friends always remembered. But like many teenagers, Annie was also vulnerable. She wanted to be loved. She wanted to feel special. And she wanted to be accepted, not just at home, but in her relationships. It was this longing for love and belonging that would lead Annie into a relationship with a boy named Darwin Chris Bagshaw, a relationship that would change everything. Chapter 2: Adopted but still searching. Annie's family gave her stability, but deep inside, she was still trying to figure out who she was. Being adopted at 9 meant she carried with her both gratitude and questions. At school, she struggled to fit in sometimes. She wasn't the most popular girl, but she had friends who cared for her. She was kind and empathetic, often the type of girl to notice when others felt left out. Her journals revealed a teenager filled with hopes and doubts. She wrote about her desire to be loved and to feel like she mattered. She sometimes worried she wasn't good enough. Then came Chris Bagshaw. Chris was a classmate, only a year younger than Annie. At first, their relationship seemed typical of young teenagers, filled with late-night messages, walks together, and quiet promises. But it also carried a darker side. Chris was not ready for responsibility. He was only 14 years old. When Annie told him something that would shake his entire world, his reaction would become the beginning of the end. Chapter 3: The Night She Disappeared. It was March 10th, 2012, a Saturday evening in Riverton, Utah. Annie left her home that night and never returned. Her parents were worried immediately. Annie was not the kind of girl to vanish without contact. By late evening, she was officially reported missing. The next day, March 11th, the search for Annie took a heartbreaking turn. A passerby spotted something in the Jordan River. Investigators arrived and pulled out the body of a young girl. It was Annie. She had been beaten and left in the water. Her shoes were missing. Her bright, promising life was gone in an instant. The Kasperzak family's worst fear had become reality. Chapter 4: The Discovery in the Jordan River. The news spread quickly. A 15-year-old girl gone. At first, investigators thought this might be a random act of violence, but the brutality of the scene suggested otherwise. Annie had been struck repeatedly, and the river had become her grave. The community was horrified. Vigils were held. Candles were lit. People wanted answers. Who could do something so cruel to a young girl? Police began following leads, but in those first crucial days, one wrong step would throw the case off track. Chapter 5. A community in shock. When Annie's death was announced, Riverton fell silent. Schools held moments of remembrance. Friends cried in disbelief. Parents held their children tighter, realizing how fragile life could be. The Casbrocks, devastated, faced their grief with strength, but the questions haunted them. Why Annie? Who had hurt her? Police received a tip that led them to suspect a man named Daniel Ferry, a local with a troubled history. A woman even claimed she had seen Annie with him. For weeks, the investigation chased this false lead. It seemed promising until it completely unraveled. The woman had lied. Ferry was not involved. Time had been wasted. The real killer remained free. Chapter 6. The investigation and false leads. The investigation was complicated. Detectives had to untangle lies, rumors, and teenage secrets. Eventually, attention turned closer to Annie's life, her relationships, and one name kept coming up again and again: Chris Bagshaw. At first, Chris denied everything. He acted like a grieving boyfriend. But evidence told another story. Witnesses reported seeing Annie with Chris the night she disappeared, and Chris had injuries he struggled to explain. Slowly, the truth began to emerge. Chapter 7. Secrets between teenagers. Annie had believed she was pregnant. She had told Chris about it. For two young teenagers, this was earth-shattering news. Chris, overwhelmed and terrified, panicked. Instead of seeking help, instead of facing the situation, his fear turned to anger. On the night of March 10th, he lured Annie to a trail by the river. There, in a moment of rage and desperation, he struck her with a shovel and left her in the water. The autopsy revealed something even more tragic. Annie had not been pregnant at all. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. And for that misunderstanding, she lost her life. This was the tragic story of Annie Kasperzak, a young girl who wanted love, but whose life was taken by someone who should have cared for her. If you found this story important, please share it. Subscribe to the channel for more true crime documentaries. And most importantly, take a moment to remember Annie, whose story reminds us how fragile life truly is.